OpenAI has just created a deal with Axel Springer for licensing news for model training. Now, I think this is a really important point because this is something that is a bit of a, I don't know how to say it, but it's a bit of a weakness right now for OpenAI in a sense that a lot of news companies, for example, the New York Times, explicitly blocked OpenAI and I think had some lawsuit with OpenAI over training on its news data, and OpenAI subsequently said, okay, hey, look, we're going to pull like the New York Times. We're not going to use that in our data sets. There's all this kind of drama around news organizations. And I think beyond that, there have some serious competition right now from xAI's Grok, which is, of course, the Twitter X kind of AI chatbot that was launched, and it really has access to up to the minute news. And so I think OpenAI needs to be able to compete with that. And so they're making this deal. So today on the podcast, I'll break down everything happening in this deal, why I think it's important, and some interesting things you may not know about it. So let's get into the podcast. Welcome to the world's #1 AI podcast, AI Chat. I'm your host, Jaden Schaefer. Make sure that you go to AIbox.ai, link in the show notes, to join the waitlist for our new AI platform. We're going to be launching an incredible platform that allows you to build anything you want with workflows in AI. So you're able to chain together ChatGPT and image generators and audio generators to make really powerful apps for your organization, or you can host them on our marketplace and actually generate royalties from them. So make sure to go to AIbox.ai and join the waitlist. In addition, if you like the podcast, if you could do me a massive favor and please leave us a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast. This helps me be able to get better guests on here as they check the reviews to see how you guys are liking it. So if you could please do that, I would really, really appreciate it. Have you ever wanted to start your own podcast? I record and publish podcasts on a platform called Spotify for Podcasters, and I absolutely love it. Essentially, you can upload from your phone or computer, and it distributes to every platform that plays podcasts. They support video podcasts, and you can make money on the platform with ads or even podcast subscriptions, something that has made my life so much easier as a podcaster. So if you're interested, I highly recommend you give it a try. You can download the Spotify for Podcast app or go to spotify.com/podcasters to get started on your podcast today. Something I think that's very interesting and relevant to this conversation is the fact that most AI tech companies argue that fair use entitles them to essentially train AI models on copyrighted material scraped from the internet. So even if they don't get permission from the people that actually created that content, this is kind of what they're sticking to. And I think they're sticking to their guns because obviously OpenAI trained on the entire internet, everything they could get their hands on for ChatGPT. But some companies, for example, OpenAI, are starting to hedge their bets. There's lawsuits going down. There's a lot of craziness. And I think they're worried about, how some of these lawsuits might shake out. So OpenAI today announced that it has reached an agreement with Axel Springer. This is the owner of a bunch of different publications, including Business Insider, Politico, and they're doing this to train their AI models on publishers' content and also to add recent Axel Springer published articles to OpenAI's ChatGPT, right? So this to me is very interesting because, of course, we know with ChatGPT, as of the time I'm recording this, they have a cutoff date of April of this year. And if you, and before this recent update, it was 2021 was the cutoff date, right? So they have these hard kind of cutoff dates where nothing new is in there. And I think they're trying to overcome, they might not be able to get everything, but they're like, hey, look, we have a cutoff date, but in addition, we're going to try to pull in some of the most recent news so we're still relevant with kind of what's happening from, Politico and Business Insider now are kind of the two big ones that they're pulling in, and some others from Axel Springer. So I think this is a good play. Obviously, I think this is really important with xAI launching Grok on Twitter, which has up to the minute news. Every tweet is indexed into Grok's chatbot, and so when people are, using I went onto X, for example, before onto Grok and was like, hey, give me the top 3 news stories in AI happening today, and it's these are the 3 things, boom, 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 and it was and here's links to the tweets and the news articles that are talking about these 3 stories. That is something I could never get out of ChatGPT. And it was some tweets that came out minutes earlier. So I think that this is, and especially because Elon Musk cut off OpenAI's access to the Twitter API. So yeah, that obviously slows them down a bit. So I think they're trying to get around that. and trying to compete with Grok in that regard. So going forward, ChatGPT users are going to get summaries of quote unquote selected articles from Axel Springer's publications, including stories normally gated behind a paywall. So this is kind of interesting, right? There was a whole debacle earlier this year where essentially you could like put a URL into ChatGPT and I think use the browse with Bing feature and say like, hey, can like copy and paste the content from that article for me? And it would like go to gated articles on like the New York Times, again, making the New York Times angry at ChatGPT. So this time, they're getting the licensing for it, but I think the snippets are going to be accompanied by both links to the full articles and it's going to have attribution. So it's going to be like, look, this is where this content came from. So in return for this, Axel Springer is going to receive a payment of an unspecified size and frequency from OpenAI. Now, this is kind of a common thing in tech, to be honest. You have, for example, like all sorts of these big tech deals where you have, like, for example, the iPhone has Google as the default browser. And just for Google being the default browser, Google pays Apple, because Google wants to be the default browser, Google pays Apple $1 billion per year. That's just like their fee. They're like, here's $1 billion. Thanks for making us the default browser. And so I'm not sure, obviously, I don't think this is going to be $1 billion, but I'm curious to see what the payment is, what the frequency of this payment is, what the deal is. I don't think they're going to release it. If they do, I'll definitely get it to you. And we have the likelihood someone may leak it. But in any case, I think the deal is valid for several years. And while it doesn't commit either side to exclusivity, right? So Axel Springer can go license this out to Anthropic and others, and OpenAI can go get other news sources as well. Axel Springer says that it'll support the outlet's existing AI-driven ventures that build upon OpenAI's technology, meaning I think Axel Springer is going to be generating AI, assisted, however created content, whatever. We see a lot of news places doing this. It's a way to compete with, rising costs and a lot of, cut back on advertising and all sorts of things, right? A lot of journalists journalistic platforms are doing this. There's a lot of controversy. Some people don't like it, but it's happening. And evidently Axel Springer is using OpenAI for that. So Axel Springer's CEO, Matthias Döpfner, was recently talking about this and said, we're excited to have shaped this global partnership between Axel Springer and OpenAI, the first of its kind. We want to explore the opportunities of AI-empowered journalism to bring quality, societal relevance, and the business model of journalism to the next level. I love how they say AI-empowered journalism instead of like AI journalists or like AI-created content. It's just like AI-empowered. We're empowering our journalists, not replacing them. I honestly, I don't have a strong opinion either way. I think AI is useful, and I think inevitably if there's a tool that is cheaper and does just as good of a job, people are going to use it. So I know some people will be triggered by that because they'll say there's no way an AI could ever be as good as a journalist, and maybe right now it can't, but inevitably I think eventually it will be able to. But that's a conversation for another time. In any case, I think outside of the publishers, using generative AI for some questionable content strategies, publishers and the generative AI vendors have a kind of hard relationship right now with, I think, the former alleging copyright infringement and increasingly, concerned about generative models cannibalizing traffic. So, for example, Google's new generative AI-powered search experience has pushed links that appear in traditional search further down the search results page, which is potentially reducing traffic to those links by as much as 40%, right? So a lot of these newspapers are complaining that, like with Google's AI-generated content, now their news articles are going to get 40% less traffic, or just they're getting pushed down the page. So the whole practice of training AI models on content without proper compensation has been like a big point of contention with a lot of these news companies. And this isn't just with OpenAI. A lot of others people have been accused of this, but essentially this has led to some countermeasures by publishers, which a lot of them are like using code to block people like OpenAI and Google from scraping their sites for data. The issue, I think, reached a peak when a bunch of different media organizations, I think Getty Images, the Associated Press, all of them kind of called for increased regulation and transparency in AI training practices. They kind of like wrote this open letter about it. But essentially, I think they're kind of emphasizing the impact of this current practice on media. And they're worried that, it's going to hit their bottom line, and they also say like it's not good for the public's access to quality information, yada, yada. So there's all of these different arguments there. And so obviously by, making this kind of paid deal, this partnership, OpenAI and Axel Springer are smoothing over the waters trying to set, I think, a precedent here where AI companies are having to actually pay for access to the news content, and they're pulling news content directly in. So yeah, I think all of this is going to be pretty vital to balancing what's going on in the industry. And I think this is also going to be vital for getting the most up-to-date news into AI models like ChatGPT. So a great play, and I think this sets a precedent. It'll be interesting to see if we see more deals like this coming down the pipe in the future. Thank you for listening to the AI Chat Podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, I'd appreciate it if you rate me wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're looking for an innovative group of AI enthusiasts, make sure you check out our Discord channel and also our Facebook community. It's obviously a lot more interactive than a podcast, where we can actually share software tools, prompts that we're using in everyday AI. I'll leave a link for those in the description below.